Question two. Help. I joined a hypergrowth startup that has squeezed all of my energy and time for self-care out of me. All right, so we're going to do what we always do. Here's what's going on with your nervous system. Here's how your socialization is potentially triggering that response. And then, here's what's going on. Here's why you do it. And then here's what we can do instead. So that's our path. So two things are going on when you are not taking care of yourself. There's a little bit of people pleasing, or maybe a lot, right? And that's the fawn response. And then there's perfectionism, and that's the flight response. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid the failure, right? If it's not perfect, then it can't get done at all. And we're constantly chasing this ideal that doesn't exist, what my mentor calls perfectionist fantasies. And then fear can also lead to the fear of like doing it wrong, can lead to a freeze response where you're either procrastinating because you're trying to avoid it, or you're in a state of paralysis. Like you can't move forward because if you can't see every step and you can't do it perfectly, then you don't want to do it at all. Like this was me for most of my life and still plenty of the time now. So what's going on with our socialization that's triggering this? Well, one, there's no validation cookies for self-care. None. No one praises you for that. No one says good job. Like you could do a post on Instagram and a couple people would give you like a whatever, oh, good job, like taking care of yourself. But like there's no real validation vending machine that you can go to consistently that will tell you, oh, self-care, good job on you today. You can feel like a really good person, right? And this is because from a young age, girls are taught to be good and polite and pleasing and to color inside the lines, follow the rules, don't rock the boat, right? And we're told that our worth comes from being likable and agreeable, right? This is what we get praised for. So we're praised for being good girls who are quiet and well-behaved and don't cause problems, right? And what happens is we internalize the messages that mistakes are failures, right? Because we're always looking to be a good whatever, right? And we're so afraid that if we're not perfect, that we'll lose the approval and we'll be seen as less capable. So of course, we're going to care what other people think in this hypergrowth startup. And I got a little lost in the first question, but this is what I was coming back to, is that we're going to be worried in a hypergrowth startup that everyone else is working hard and I can't not work hard. And so the way that I get more time in my day is to not take care of any of my own needs. So what are the feelings that are driving this? There's so much fear of failure, fear of criticism, fear of not being enough, right? Worrying that if you don't get it right, something really bad will happen, like rejection, disapproval, or judgment, right? This is the thing that I would guess, certainly what would drive me in a hypergrowth startup would be this idea that everyone's going to see that I'm not working as hard as they are, right? Even if I know now going a few years ago when I went back into an early stage startup, it was I finally had the confidence and sort of the self-assuredness to be I know what I can get done in this amount of time and I'm not available in those other hours. But I also was in a senior executive role where I could draw those lines and clearly state, if you want me here, there will not be all of this. I'm doing calls at 8 p.m. and on Sunday night, right? That's not happening. Get your shit together and get it done during the week, right? But that was partially an earned thing and partially my own self-assuredness of knowing that what I had to contribute and that I was able, particularly in this company, to work smarter. I didn't have to work as hard because I could work much smarter because I had a lot more experience than most of the people working there. So in lieu of that, right, we've got other feelings that are going on. So you worry if you don't get it right, that this will happen, right? Anxiety from the overthinking and the pressure to meet impossible standards. You've got some guilt and shame in there, right? If I screw this up, and then some frustration and resentment again, right? The same with people pleasing, that this will start building up of I missed that family event because I couldn't fly out on a Friday because we had this stupid blah, blah, blah thing, right? Like the things you start building that frustration and resentment because you're not getting that recharge time. And so ultimately, you're going to end up exhausted and on the verge of burnout, which is where I was in 2017, where you're mentally and emotionally exhausted and possibly physically exhausted too, because that strive for perfection leaves you drained. And then that drives, in turn, you're going to feel like you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and like drawing from like a dry well, which is where I was when I burned out and when I walked away at the height of my career. So, but that, all of that, the fear and everything else is what's driving you to do it. And then the fear of being left out, right? Back to that evolutionary biology sort of element that I don't know if we were talking about this one or the other one, where it's hard coded into us that if we were left out of the tribe, right, that we would freeze to death, starve to death, or get eaten by a lion, right? So there is that thing that of like, oh, well, maybe I would be fired, or maybe no one will want to work with me anymore. Maybe it'll be harder to get things done if I don't keep giving more than I actually have. So Ashley asks, how do we train our nervous system to not believe mistake equals failure? Yeah, that's a great question. So and you see this as a gender difference too, of like, there's a difference between that, like a mistake happened and one person's going to believe I'm a failure and the other one's going to be, I tried something that failed, right? So there's like, we don't have to take it on as an evaluation of our skill or ability or future potential, right? It's just, I tried a thing, it didn't work. Here's what I learned. I'm going to go try it again, right? But we have to separate. Like, I can be a person who makes mistakes and still be amazing at my job, right? You can use an and statement there, right? I can, you could like, I can get fired and still be a really great employee, right? For a different company, right? Like you can put some and statements in there, like, because it's not a verdict. It's not a one time like, man, you screwed up that one thing. It's all over for you, right? It's not like you were convicted of murder and you're being sent away for whatever amount of time, right? It's like, I screwed up and we missed this deadline, or I screwed up and I felt really embarrassed in this meeting because I gave the wrong answer, like whatever it is. But like, try to separate the action from the person, and that will really take down the stakes on it. Like, I'm a person who makes mistakes every day, right? If you just accept that and try to get out of that perfectionist, like running around, like trying to make it all perfect and try to never, ever, ever make this mistake again. If you just accept that mistakes will happen all the time as a fact, I'm a person who makes a lot of mistakes, right? That will change the frame instead of I'm a person who's always trying not to make any mistakes. Then you're always going to fail. You're going to think you're a failure, right? So hopefully that answers. Let me know. Okay, so what is driving this, right? Like, what are the predictable behaviors? Well, of course, we're worried what our colleagues will think if we're not grinding it out nights and weekends. Of course we are, right? There's a bunch of reasons for that. Of course, we over deliver, over prepare, and over apologize anything to avoid that criticism. Of course, we're going to do that because that's how we get our validation cookies, right? Of course, we're going to use perfectionism as shield to protect us from judgment, right? That exactly the question that Ashley just asked, right? Because otherwise we don't get our cookies, right? And of course, we beat ourselves up when we can't distinguish the difference between a mistake and a failure, right? Very rarely do we like epically fail, right? But we make a lot of mistakes. And of course, we prioritize our work over our health because there are no validation cookies for self-care. Like, all this makes total sense. So what happens when we do this though? What happens when we do this very predictable set of things? It ends up keeping us small and stuck and silenced, which sucks. The fear of falling short keeps us from taking risks and speaking up and showing up as our authentic, messy selves, right? But if we can take it, if you can distinguish between a mistake and a failure and the thing that happened and the person who did the thing, right? Then you get a lot more freedom there. And we're so worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing that we rob the world and ourselves of our own brilliance. And we're so worried about needing to know every step, because if we don't know every step, that it's all going to go perfectly, then we don't want to take any steps, because any step might lead us to failure, right? But then we just get stuck at the starting line and we never try anything and we never go anywhere. And that's the part I hate the most about perfectionism. And that's the part that like we just really want to blow up as much as possible. Okay. So what are our tips to try? So we're going to cancel the UDA triplets, the shoulda, coulda, and woulda, right? These are the things that are creating shame. So in this situation, I should have logged on for that meeting. I could have done this on Sunday, and now I'm regretting it on Tuesday because I don't feel prepared enough, or like I didn't get the thing to the person in time, right? If only I would have done more, right? These are the things that are driving it. So stop using these judging words, because they create shame, and shame will not get you anywhere. And so think about like how you can gas yourself up instead of like having your inner bully following you around, shoulding, coulding, and woulding all over yourself. Have your inner Lizzo or your inner like whomever to go in and gas you up and be like, you got this, right? You are valued, you are worthy, you are loved. I know this. I know you can do this. I believe in you, right? That's a very different energy that's going to like get you going in a different way. And then the other thing is what I was talking about with the answer to Ashley's question also earlier, is using and statements. So I can make a huge mistake and be amazing at my job. I can yell at my kids and be a loving, supportive parent, right? I can schedule my free time first and be a top performer. And this is the one I really suggest for this particular question, is scheduling your free time first. It's non-negotiable time. Taking care of you is truly non-negotiable, because if you don't, you will burn out. You will do what I did. You will walk away, hopefully not to the extreme. Like I walked away at the height of my career, like from a job I was amazing at, that like was just getting good at a company that I built from the ground up. Like it sucked to walk away from that. But if I'd learned that like my free time, my self-care time was non-negotiable, this was always going to happen, and I made that commitment to myself, it would have been a very different thing. I wouldn't have got to that point. Like I might have still left because it was a super stressful job, but I wouldn't have left in like this burnout, like flame out blaze of glory. All right. So, or blaze of not glory, really. All right. So we're going to hop into the networking. So if y'all are on the live stream and you want to network, then y'all should come over here.